Is gaming on Linux viable in the current year? I'd say it probably depends entirely on the games that you normally play, but in general, hell yeah, it is definitely viable. A lot of that is thanks to Valve. Before Valve started putting effort into Proton, there was Wine. Both work more or less the same way. Wine is a compatibility layer that allows you to run Windows programs in Linux. But Proton is the same thing, but it focuses primarily on games. Valve, if you're unaware, is a company that used to make games, then they created Steam, and then now, reading the writing on the wall when it comes to Windows, they decided that they wanted to go ahead and focus on an operating system that was a little bit more open and an operating system that isn't so closed off like Windows is. Proton is something that Valve has been working on, and on top of that, they've also introduced the Steam Deck, which has been a huge hit, so much so that other companies are now starting to make handhelds as well. Now, if you have a Steam Deck, or if you know somebody with a Steam Deck, guess what? That's gaming on Linux right there. And you can ask anybody with a Steam Deck, ask him what the process is in regards to installing and playing a game, and they'll probably tell you that it's just about as seamless as it is in Windows, if not a more streamlined or better experience. That being said, again, Linux isn't perfect, but all of these things has made it a definite viable option. I've been on Linux for about maybe, I want to say it was maybe like October of 2021. So a few years now. You know, it's not like, oh, I've been on Linux for decades. But in those few years, I've seen leaps and bounds of improvements and changes. It's more easier now than ever to use Linux as your gaming operating system. Now, is it perfect? No, it's never going to be perfect. It's just the nature of Linux. It's never going to be perfect. So one of the pros and cons of Linux is the fact that it's so modular. It's a pro because anybody can customize and do what they want with their system, change different parts out, stuff like that. Now, the downside of this is that there isn't a standardization. Regardless of this, the open source community, the Linux community, and Valve have done so much to make the gaming experience on Linux as hassle-free as possible. A lot of games now are becoming more and more compatible with Linux, thanks to Valve's Proton, which is a compatibility layer that translates the Windows calls to something that Linux can understand. So because of this, there's always going to be a little bit of overhead where Linux kind of has to compute all the stuff that's going on with the game. That being said, Windows has become such a bloated mess full of background processes that are serving ads or spying on you, you know, all this telemetry that's taking all this information about you, and all this stuff that's running in the background has actually caused Windows to lose out on performance more than Linux does at certain games, which is mind-boggling if you think about it. Because a lot of these games aren't even native to Linux, yet some of them will actually work better on Linux than they do on Windows, which, you know, again, it's pretty wild. The reason why I'm getting into this is, funny enough, I had a conversation with a few friends recently about how Windows 10, I believe, is going to be at end of life near the end of this year, around, you know, maybe October or so. One of them said that he doesn't want to move to 11, but he doesn't really have much of a choice, and the other one said that he has no interest in moving to a different operating system other than Windows 11 because he doesn't want to have to learn something new, which kind of doesn't make sense because Windows 11 is technically a new operating system, and with every Windows they always change shit up anyway, but whatever. One of my buddies, he said that basically once Linux has gotten to a point where it's just stuff just works, you know, like if he wants to install a game and play it, he just clicks play and that's it, then he'll switch over to it. And it's funny because I mentioned it to him. I'm like, well, one, SteamOS is already like that. I'm like, dude, you have a Steam Deck, right? That is literally the experience. You go ahead, you click install and you play it. That's it. Now, that's on the Steam Deck with a distribution of Linux specifically made and tailored for that hardware. Is that experience going to translate over to the desktop for most games? Yeah, it will. It's almost a one-to-one. It's the same as in Windows as it is in Linux when it comes to installing and playing most games. Now, that's not to say that there aren't any games that don't run. There are games that don't run, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But right now, I kind of want to focus a little bit more on the Steam side of things. So, aside from SteamOS, right? A lot of people are kind of holding their breath and waiting for SteamOS to take the plunge for Linux. You don't have to necessarily do that. Remember, a Linux distribution is exactly that. It's a distribution with a bunch of different packages or programs already set up for you. If you want to go for something a little bit more more gaming oriented like a SteamOS would be, you could always try out ChimeraOS or Bazzite. Now, I don't have personal experience with either of these two, but both of these distributions are supposed to be catered more for the people that are essentially using their PCs as gaming consoles or gaming desktops. It is focused for those things specifically. Let's say this is your first time running Linux and you're afraid that a particular game might not necessarily work on Linux. So there are ways that you could figure this out. At least for Steam games specifically, there's ProtonDB. Okay, so this is Proton Database. Let's say you want to find a specific game. Now, if you're unsure if a particular game works or on the fence about buying it, you could simply search it here. So let's Elden Ring. All right, so Elden Ring, gold. Gold usually means that it'll run just fine. You might have to do a couple of tweaks, maybe pick a specific kind of Proton or something like that. But in general, it usually will work, no problem. People will literally post the things that help them. So this whole community aspect of gaming on Linux, it's fucking awesome because everybody helps each other out. Obviously, there's always, going to be some elitists and stuff like that. But in general, most people are very helpful, especially in Proton Database. It's really nice. How about Night Rain? This is new. This game came out not that long ago, and it's platinum. It runs perfectly. Now, does that mean it's going to run perfectly for everybody? Not exactly. Not always. Again, everybody's got different kinds of distributions. Okay, so he's running Arch Linux. He's running whatever that is for your desktop. Fedora, Arch. Arch. Gentoo. Wow, what a Chad. Nobara. Oh, Nobara, I forgot about that one. I think that's the guy, that's by the same guy that did Proton GE, I think, or something like that. I'd have to look into it. I mean, you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. So you can do this for a bunch of different games, But again, not every game is going to run perfectly, right? So for example, right? Runs, but often crashes or has issues preventing from playing comfortably, right? Non-EAC client because devs won't enable EAC, and I'll get to that in a second. But so funny enough, this game works 100% on Linux, the game itself. In other words, you could run it, it'll run smooth, but the problem is the anti-cheat. And so as soon as you join a normal server with anti-cheat, it'll kick you out. Now, there are some servers that let you play because they don't have easy anti-cheat. And this is like basically, it's kind of like a universally known like Linux server for Rust, right? So for example, I know it's around here. Premium servers, maybe it'd be worth to let Linux Rust players play on those too. So if you're looking for a place to check out, Rustux, Linux friendly. So they're even putting the servers that are Linux friendly and don't have the easy anti-cheat. What else? So of course, as everyone has said, only able to use easy anti-cheat disabled servers. Here's one. I remember this one, Deadlock. I remember playing on that one with a buddy of mine. So again, it's not 100% perfect, but for most games it does. And again, it's not the issue of the game. Most of the games that don't work on Linux are not because the game itself doesn't work. It's because of the fucking anti-cheat. And Valve has done lots of stuff to make it as easy and painless as possible for game developers and companies to get their games to run on Linux. Like Proton, I mean, most games, even though they're not native Linux games, will run just fine because of Proton. And then they've even done stuff to get the anti-cheat to work in Linux as well. Some of these companies, whether it's because they're lazy or because they just don't want to, that is on them. That is not on Valve. It's not on the actual anti-cheat program itself. It's on the developer or it's on the company behind that game that will usually make the decision that no, they're not going to do it. So for example, well, here, let's take a look. You can always check out this site, or areweanticheatyet.com, okay? And it'll show you the games that have anti-cheat and the ones that, they actually went through the minimal effort of supporting Linux through it. So for example, the Halo Chief the Master Chief Collection has easy anti-cheat, but it works on Linux. I actually played this with a buddy of mine. He was on Windows, I was on Linux. Seamless, no issues whatsoever. Now Fortnite's gonna, they straight up denied it. In other words, no, they do not want to provide support. Apex Legends used to have support. I used to play Apex Legends on my Linux desktop, and then they stopped supporting it. Valorant, League of Legends, those kinds of anti-cheat, they're kernel level anti-cheat. The Linux kernel is not the same as the Windows kernel. So those anti-cheats are made for the Windows kernel. They're not going to be compatible with it, so you're not going to be able to play those games. Despite all that, look, Halo Infinite, supported, Back 4 Blood. Does anybody play this here? Back 4 Blood. PUBG's broken. Rainbow Six Siege denied. In other words, they're not providing support. Yeah, a lot of games do. Oh, Destiny, I remember that. Destiny, they said no. So, in my opinion, if these are games that you play daily, like these are your games and you gotta play them, and you don't want to give them up, guess what? Linux ain't for you. If you're like me, a lot of these games, unless I find a workaround, I just don't even bother. They're not worth my time. If it's not worth it for this company to do this supposed simple fix to allow their anti-cheat to be supported under Linux, then I'm not going to support those games. But hey, that's how I see it. I know my viewpoint is not the same as everybody else's, so I get it. These are ways that you can find out if the games that you do currently play, if you can play them on Linux. Now, all of this stuff was more or less Steam related. All right, obviously I talked a little bit about Fortnite and Apex Legends and stuff like that. Well, Apex is on Steam as well, but what about games that are not on Steam? Cool, Steam makes it super easy, super seamless for most of their game library to run on Linux. Fantastic. But what about other launchers? What about Epic Games launcher? What about Ubisoft's, I don't know what the hell it's called, or EA Origin? What about those kinds of things? Or what about Blizzard, the Blizzard launcher? What about those? Well, they're not going to have as much support as Steam. Obviously, Steam is kind of like spearheading this. There is support out there. Okay, so for example, there is Lutris. Now, there's another one called Heroic Games Launcher, and I'm not too familiar with that one personally. Honestly, a lot of the games that I play are on Steam, and the games that are not on Steam, I can run them just fine through Lutris. Most of them are older games, so like Dark Age of Camelot. Well, this is not an older game, but it's kind of like a niche little MMO. The Project 1999 for those that want to play EQ. All of these can run on Linux. Funny enough, Linux is usually a lot better when it comes to running older games. So if you want to run something like Max Payne, EverQuest, Dark Age of Camelot, any of those kinds of games, you could probably run it a lot easier than if you were using Windows. What you would normally do is you would click here to add a game. You could search for a game. So I'll go ahead and search for Heroes of the Storm real quick. I know I have it here already. It's gonna have like a script, like an install script that you don't have to worry about. You don't have to do anything. It's already set up for you. All you got to do is click install. And once you do that, you'll have it here. All right. Now, there's a lot of different options that you can mess around with and tinker with. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing all of this stuff unless something doesn't work, right? So, for example, the runner is going to be Wine, but I'm going to use the GE Proton. In other words, Proton compatibility layer that Steam uses. I'm going to be using that through Lutris to run a non-Steam game. I'll go ahead and click play. All right, so yeah, the game runs. It runs just fine. I could play if I wanted to, right? And like, for example, let's go to... So, yeah, runs flawlessly, no problems, no hiccups, nothing. So, a lot of games, a lot work out of the box with very minimal to no issues. And even on the flip side, some of them will run even better on Linux than they do on Windows. As someone that games, it's never been a better time to actually move over to Linux. Windows 10 is going to be reaching near end of life soon. It's going to more than likely try and force you to move to Windows 11, because that's what they love to do. That's what Microsoft loves to do. They like to force shit on you. With Linux, yeah, it takes a little bit to get used to the different operating system. But once you got it set up the way that you want it, it does what you want it to do. Honestly, I think the biggest hurdle right now when it comes to gaming on Linux is just the anti-cheat. The issue of the companies. You can bet your ass that they can go ahead and they can set up easy anti-cheat to run on Linux for other people to play. They just don't want to. So why am I going to play a game where these people don't want to support the operating system that I'm running? And I'd understand if it was like a difficult thing to enable this anti-cheat, but look at all these other games and game devs that do it. Again, Valve's trying to make it as flawless as possible. And if they don't want to do it, in my opinion, those games don't deserve to be played. I hope I was able to show you that it's not so scary to play games on Linux. It's pretty easy nowadays. And if you're interested in trying out Linux, I have another video here showing you how to make a bootable USB drive so that you can try out different distributions of Linux like ChimeraOS or Bazzite. Aside from that, I hope to see you on the next video. Have a good one.